Because that's why we're all there. Most of the people in the room are paid because of that one child and the ones like her. So why not draw a visual connection kinesthetically inside them? So they'll walk away going, oh. And the next meeting, I put a new picture or a bunch of pictures. Some of it has to do with what they have accomplished, what progress has been made. Or some of it is outside of school, and it just, the looks on their faces is worth every single picture, because it takes them outside of the confines of their idea of who my daughter is, connected to disability. And it kind of blows her mind. She can't talk, she can't walk, so what can she do? My daughter's 25 now, so come through with an interesting perspective. I was first trained as an educator, and I love children. So it didn't matter what child came into my room, they were that person. Didn't matter who. But then that was a pretty long time ago. And we didn't get children who had autism or physical disabilities. We knew that there was a section in our, in our high school that was a segregated room. They were in school, and that kind of will lead us into, I'm going to go through the history of education, legislation, and where we are today. And I want to let you know that each of you are part of the making of history right now, because it's a continuum of the sort of movement for education. However, it's had a very long, slow rise. And we want to do that, and that long, slow rise has happened despite legislation. The speed of it is despite legislation. It's not very speedy. So we've had quite a dichotomy between the intent of legislation as it was made, go through why it was made, and what's been happening with that legislation as it translates into action in the classroom, in the schools, in the districts, in the province, and across Canada. In fact, nationwide and internationally. So if I was to peg Canada somewhere on a scale of where we're at with inclusive education and with the intent of legislation, I'd say we're pretty much in the top 10th percentile. So we're not doing badly. However, that means nothing when it's our child who's needing advocacy, someone to advocate for them. In my vocabulary, the word advocacy, which I couldn't even say for 10 years, the word, meant to me that somebody else wasn't doing their job. When we have inclusion, doesn't that mean include? So why was I sitting at the table fighting for the rights of my child without saying, I'm here to fight for the rights of my child? So I picked up from other families, other individuals, other parents. I picked up on their language that they used, their strategies that worked. I found out very quickly the initiatives and strategies that didn't work for me, and I learned very quickly to apologize. Say, I didn't mean to say that, I take it back. And we're all part of humanity, we all have human frailties. So I found that was the best tactic to use. I learned to control my knee-jerk reactions, and I couldn't be more passionate now about the idea and the notion of education for all. And I'm completely avoiding that word, inclusion. Because inclusion is happening when you don't even notice it. If it's not, if we have to use the word inclusive education, there's a problem with that. So let's get straight on to, sorry, I might just, can you all see that? Okay, so accessing school supports, education rights, supports, and collaboration, because that's what it's all about. It's collaboration, you are part of a team, your son or daughter or children are the reason why everybody's there, and up in the top corner, so straight into the history, we have a school room which was probably in the 1930s, 40s, and 40s. They're wooden desks. The chairs are attached, or they look attached to the desk. And there you have the teacher telling the students what the information is. It looks like an all-boys class at that point. I'm sure it changed. Sorry, I didn't know that was going to change right there. Okay, and then, how much has changed in 75 years? Well, as you notice over here in the corner, there's the teacher. They look like they borrowed the desks from the last 75 years, which is recycling. That's pretty cool. They're retro. And all the students have laptops on their desks. So we've actually only changed the technology. They were using pencils and chalkboards and chalk. Now they're still pencils and pens, but they're laptops. So, are you aware that you're part of history right now? So that was then. Notice there were no wheelchairs. There were likely no persons with disabilities. In the second class, there may have been, which is a good sign because we couldn't really notice. Now, interestingly, has anything changed in 700 years? This is a picture of a 14th century classroom. Here's the prof. Here are the students. Very interestingly, there are women in there. And here we have some people probably auditing. So really the structure hasn't changed. However, today the good news is it is very much changing. Because of technology, the classroom is starting to lose its bounds, its confines. The children, the students can just fly straight into their iPod, iPhone, and say, nope, that's wrong, it just changed. So the value of the dollar in somewhere in the world, nope, just changed. So now educators now have to be on their toes. We'll go back to here. Why was it that we needed to put in legislation for persons with disabilities? First of all, we had to put in rights for everyone. This is the Canadian Bill of Rights. And it mentions education. Everybody has a right to an education. So then it went to the province's responsibility to figure out how they wanted their education to come out. So it was revised in latest, the School Act of BC was revised in 2014. In 2006, it leapt to the world scene into the UN Convention of Persons with Disabilities, and Article 24 is the article on the rights to an education. So the orange indicates, well, we're Canada. Up in the blue, we've signed, which means we agree with the notion of education for all and all the supports that it requires. I'd really like to pause this. Come on. And in 2006, Canada ratified it, which means they will uphold everything that's in the convention, including take action. So when I last checked, there was no action plan. There may have been now. I haven't got my iPhone right now, but there might be. I know they're asking for feedback. and they will take it from anyone. So if you feel so inclined, do write. They have to take that into consideration, your voice. Okay. So it goes on like this. States parties recognize the right of persons with disabilities to education. So what does that mean? Period. I don't get it. They have a right to an education. So why are children being guided into certain courses when maybe there's a whole world out there they could be learning as well, probably in science and social studies. They could learn about their own bodies. It's very relevant, probably more so. If they're in social science studies, are they covering rights? You would think they would be included in that. Full development of human potential. Wow, that is loaded. We should be so lucky to have our own full potential be developed. And in fact, we do have a choice. We can take courses we like, we prefer, we can pursue recreational activities, we can develop our potential cultural. So what does it mean, and how is it translating into actions within our school system? How is the sense of dignity and self-worth being promoted? What does it mean, the strengthening of respect for human rights? When we see children being isolated, are we relating to them when we see that happening and going, what if that was me? What if that was my child? Well, actually, the people in this room, it probably has happened to our children at one point or another. It's happening right now. So the intent of the law, the intent of legislation is being translated into the way people need it. So if they don't know how it translates, maybe there's an opportunity for education and some work in those areas. So strengthening not only respect for human rights, but fundamental freedoms and human diversity. Wow. When my daughter has multiple complex health care involvements, we're talking about as diverse a person as you could possibly get. When you look at all the supports that have enabled her throughout the years, we're talking technology, speech and language, we're talking medical issues, and all the supports that are built there for her. We're also talking volunteers that work with her, and they require that to be eligible to apply for master's programs in physio and occupational therapies and speech and language pathology. So wait a minute here, we have an opportunity that this person is not really disabled when somebody else can come into their life and learn from them and get what they need from them and go somewhere else. That individual has just enriched somebody else's life. Is that value being acknowledged by others? Maybe there's another opportunity for education in the public. Persons with disabilities are not excluded from the general education system. When I get phone calls from social workers about challenges that are happening in the education system, I think we're at a tipping point. I think we're spilling over the edges. So when they can't even get into a school or stay in a school, when their child has been told, the parents have been told, they're allowed to stay here for the first 20 minutes of every day. Well, a dialogue happens, and because there's a feeling that it's not quite right, I don't understand that. So out comes the advocacy part of the parent, says, I think they can stay for longer. I have some suggestions. So there opens up another opportunity for learning and for collaboration. So as long as the parent has the wherewithal and the language, because in this country we have multiple languages, they can actually forge a way through information and let the education system know, by the way, there is a way to teach my child. And if you do it this way, you'll have better results than if you do it this way. So as an educator, I would be all ears. I would be saying, bring it on. I really need those tips and strategies that work for you. And inclusion infers exclusion. So every time you hear that, and every time you say that, that comes with the history. Why did we need the word inclusion put into our laws, put into our education policies? Because nobody was really either wanting to or knowing how to do it. So here we have still seclusion rooms. We have a massive survey that was conducted by Inclusion BC. It's called Stop Hurting Kids, a Parent's Guide. And it's a great document that respectfully addresses issues, but it also shows some really strong patterns of behaviors of some schools, of some classrooms, of some districts, and of the province. So they have some interesting charts. You might want to look at this, that our practice is still going on today. Why did they say stop hurting kids? I said to them, that's really strong language. And then I heard some of the things that were still happening. And honestly, if the general public knew about those incidents, they would be going, what are you doing? Because it impacts people. My saying is, what happens to one person impacts the rest of us. So if we're an onlooker and we see something happening, first of all, if we don't do anything about it, we're part of it, which is awful. But secondly, if we see something happening, what do we do? How do we not become part of that hurt? And how do we escape from being hurt ourselves? We relate to each other's harm and hurts. We're empathetic people. Research has proven that what has impacted a person, if they just recall the details of that physical impact, their brain waves hit the exact same highs and lows as did the original impact. And when they test the person who's listening to the story, who has not experienced that, their brainwaves, interestingly, will register very similar highs and lows as well. So we are very much connected. It's kind of has to do with physics. For every push, there's a shove. If you push the air molecules in front of you, they bump into the others. So it's no small wonder that we all feel that innately this is wrong. Innately there could be something better. All right, so let's move on to the next one. Persons with disabilities receive support required within the general education system to facilitate their education more effectively. So, what does that mean? It means, bottom line, at this day and age, at this point in history, there's not enough money to support the needs that are required to be supported. So does that mean a person with sign language is paired up with the child who needs to communicate through sign language? That's an issue, because that's dollars. It all comes down to budget. Are there other ways we can facilitate that? Maybe there's a student going through one of the college programs who needs that one-on-one chance to work with somebody who speaks through sign language. Why is it that our system can't accommodate and open up? Maybe they do. Maybe some are doing that. But for this is one of the articles underneath the education convention, UN convention. So if Canada has signed off on that, where's the accountability? Who's accountable to whom? That system seems lacking. So if we have one child who's not receiving, who's not, doesn't have a person to sign language with them, why is that happening? And who's accountable for that? Is it the education system? Is it the BC education system? Is it the separate district? Is it the separate school? Is it the principal's responsibility? Is it the resource teacher's responsibility? Who does it come to? So we actually have a mismatch. Maybe it's a seniority problem. Maybe that child has a teacher assistant who doesn't have sign language, and that's all they're getting because that's the seniority with the union. So now we have multiple levels, and it's complex too. So that's probably, I'm guessing, why the slow improvement is happening over such a long length of time. States parties shall enable persons with disabilities to learn life and social development skills to facilitate their full and equal participation in education. So generally, I see a lot of the high school students going into a life skills class. And that's okay, but can they add? Can they read? Can they add and read? Maybe they're having challenges with that, but honestly, if you go to the core of the student, of the child, of the individual, they have areas of interest, and why can't you sneak some math in there too? Take, for instance, airplanes. If that child has an avid, obsessive interest, driving us crazy, about planes, wow, there's elevation, there's speed, there's wingspan. You can narrow it down to even the most basic math. And as far as social studies goes, why couldn't he do a project or she do a project on airplanes and social studies? Where do airplanes take people? Around the world. Now that just opened up a whole world of social studies to them. Where's the geography out the airplane window? Well, those are mountains. Do you know what's on the top of those mountains? So there's always an answer for these kids. Historically, we have come from a medical model. Our child is diagnosed. This is how you fix them. It's been transferred into the school education system. So really, we're victims of our own doing, of history. While this has been good medically, maybe it hasn't been so good in education field. Because we look at the person's areas that need fixing. And if we thought about ourselves, it's like, I hide my areas that need fixing. I will do anything to cover up my shortfalls. Really lousy at math. But I could probably do it if I was really motivated to do it in an area I wanted to. So really, do you want to work with the person's diversity? What makes them up? What makes them tick? Something does. There's always something. Is it music? Music is full of science and math and cultural events and instrument making, and you can go into all kinds of areas with the person's strengths. So it's not a surprise that education has developed into differentiated learning, into areas working person-centered learning, strengths-based learning. And that, I would have been all over that had math been presented to me in a way that was just so much. How did the science teachers do it? They were some of the most fun teachers to have because they were always doing something to involve us. There's another key, involvement, physical involvement. I actually have to stand up and move around. If I'd been diagnosed, maybe I would have come up, they would have come up with some label, medical label for me, ADD. Like, bring it on. I don't know what that means. This is just me. No apologies. So why wouldn't we do that with all children? So, and by the way, I love those pictures of those birds. Are those lovebirds? So getting the story straight. This is inclusion with all the colors mixed together in the same circle. I love this diagram. This is exclusion, so all the colors are outside of the circle. Segregation, well, they have a circle of their own, and it's still happening really in a large way. Integration is they've only moved the circle into the bigger circle. They still are contained within, usually, typically, historically, they're at the back of the room. So is that different from the back of the bus? We have some parallels with other groups in history. We started in institutions who, in our culture of Canadian history, have been institutionalized. Several. They've gotten rid of a lot of the institutions, not completely across Canada. And some of them are very, very quietly going under the radar right now. So there's some advocacy places out there that are working on that. On this door is a teacher's door. I remember teachers and students being able to decorate the teacher's door. So much fun. And this one has been filled by a loving teacher. And some of the things that teacher has said is, when you enter this classroom, you are scientists, explorers, you are important, you are loved, you are respected, you are a friend, you are the reason we are here. And to me, that gets the whole picture straight. On the other hand, this is one of the charts that is about the length of time children are being secluded from the classroom. So we still have a lot of work to go. Sorry, I'm just going to look at this. This is 3 to 50 minutes outside of the classroom. Some of it's really well spent. The speech and language pathologist comes in, teaches them a new application on their iPad. Bam, they are set for another year or two, or another month or two. And this one is more than 3 hours. So out of 25 people that responded to this survey, there's almost 10 people. That's a large percentage that are secluded from their peers for more than 3 hours a day. So we still have quite a way to go. And I'm very interested in the new neuroscience research coming out. It just shows how the brain is such a mystery still, and how new technology has allowed them to track the firing of the neurons in the brain, the areas that light up. We know that children with special needs learn more when they see modeling done by their peers. Why wouldn't they be with their peers then? We know that peers learn more about empathy, acceptance, and helping others when they work with differently abled people. Their peers, their typical peers. And we know that educators thrive when their professional knowledge and skill set match the needs of their students. Wouldn't that's what every educator wants, to be a good teacher. So this is a good setting. Embedding evidence-based research into professional development means win, win, win. And when I say win, 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 it's the teachers win, the students win, and when the students win, their teacher assistants, sisters and brothers, families, and uncles and aunts win too. And when they're all winning, it has this ripple out effect. The best learning happens when there's an emotional attachment to the learning. So if you connect the piece of information, the concept you want your students to acquire, if you build in an emotional attachment within that concept, allow flexibility in how you present. So maybe there's multiple ways you can present information. Maybe it's not, you will read this textbook, which might be out of date, or may not, and you will answer the questions X to Y. Why not allow the student to access pieces of that information the way they wish to, the way they intuitively know will work for them? And why wouldn't you build a multiple method of how they can tell you, how they can let you know? Maybe they can't even speak, so I take that back. They may not be able to tell you how they will indicate what they've learned. And they will be selective, like you and I. We have selective listening. We'll hear what we want to hear. And we'll repeat back what we found interesting. So, multiple means of representation, multiple means of access to the information. We have 25 years of universal design for learning. And it builds in around all these aspects of the individual uniqueness. We have learned to educate in better ways. Where do we need to go to have education reflect this? Maybe we need to go to the roots. Now these are pictures of today. Children are not sitting down. They're standing up, accessing technology. We've got multiple ways of learning. If you're a visual learner, there's graphics, there's a library book. There's library books that speak now. They've digitized the entire, some schools have digitized entire libraries. So if you're an ESL student, all you have to do is scroll over a word to know the meaning of it. Because it's been digitized, it'll tell you what the definition is. And maybe there's a picture pop-up, or maybe there's a connection to the internet, like the smart boards, and they can connect directly to Ecuador and speak to a child in Ecuador classroom. So these students are now getting a very holistic education. I love this diagram. That's me. I'm an abstract artist in my spare time. So this really fires my brain cells. So we're all very specific, have specific learning styles, and there's not many. There's only 3 or 4 different learning styles. Why aren't we accommodating that in our classrooms? In every classroom, in every educational setting. All they've been starting to, they have distance learning, there's lots out there. Oh. Got that. And this little thing starts as a little peanut down here, and you can't really read it until it gets a little bit, if I don't learn the way you teach, then teach me the way I learn. That's a pretty exciting concept. It will blow an educator's mind, like, oh, what an idea. So, and it's colorful, exciting, it has graphics in it, just that thing I think is a really neat message. Got it. And indications of other classrooms. You know, just looking at this, I think, wow, it takes a lot of money to get there, but obviously somebody put in the effort to make it so. These are different classrooms. It's in a circle. Everybody's equal. Not sure if I can detect anybody in a wheelchair, but they could be hidden away back there, pulled up in behind that monitor. These children have 3D glasses on, or interactive monitors in, and they're obviously animated. So, and in the end it says, project-based learning increases long-term retention. Many schools are just going straight into project-based learning because it makes learning relevant. Students are going out into the community and working on something like a water project. And they have actually come up with answers for the engineers because they think that way. They know it's important, they're valued for their input, and they have to do research, they have to do math, they have to do science, they have to interact socially. So they're learning many, many skills. Some are arts-based, arts-driven schools. Some are outdoor ed schools. They only go to school outdoors. It'd be kind of cold, but yes, they figure out and they tell you how they manage through the cold. But they're learning while they're doing it. So there's lots of new energies out there and possibilities. So jumping to how do we get from where we are to where we'd love to be? And I would say that collaboration is key. Learning skills in order to become a good collaborator is a must for the word collaboration. Once you know it's working is when a synergy starts up. So all it takes is enlightening, and this is our job as families. We must enlighten, we must educate educators as to the possibilities, the options available, the choices that can be made. We know our child. We might not be an educator, but honestly, if you take the elements, the core of our child, and pass them forward to an educator with a couple of ideas that you think, let's steer clear of this area, but if we went here, there are possibilities. And if I give you 2 options or 3, would you be okay with that choice? Educators love choice. And they love nothing better than a challenge too. We want to make sure that where challenge happens in our child's life every day. Because when everything sits back and goes along, it becomes not relevant to our child. The next step is they become disengaged, bored, and what would happen to you or I if we were disengaged and bored? Well, I start fussing with my papers, I start doodling on a paper. What if I still was bored? I'd be wiggling in my seat, talking to the next person, and I would become disruptive. I would become non-compliant. I would become all those words that we have known in our child's life that have been used to connect with our child's behaviors. So that becomes another key word. And my thought is that the behaviors would not exist if my child was engaged. So now, as educators, we need to find what motivates them, and we need parents to give us those keys, those cues, those tips in how to motivate our child. What motivates them? And what might irritate us as a parent might be the key to channeling or rechanneling the energy of our child into an education opportunity. That's my word of the day. So how do you abdicate? I mentioned prior to this that the first thing I ever did was place a photograph of my daughter in the middle of the table. At one point we had probably 18 people around a boardroom table. That was the apex. Usually it was about 8 or 10. It just floored me, and I can't imagine how some parents deal with that many people when they're the only one there. So bring a friend, bring another parent, bring one of the resources from the community. You know what it does? It helps set up synergy. It helps bring everybody up to a level of professionalism and maintains that. So when we put the child's photograph in the middle of the table, I always say, this is my child, this is why we're here, and I always acknowledge appreciation for the efforts that everybody has done, because they work hard. I work hard, they work hard. I acknowledge some of the good, 2 or 3 good things that they have done that have maybe helped my daughter progress, or has been a funny instant, and we all shared this huge laugh, and it had a ripple effect outside of that. We often don't know the ripple effect that our child is making. We don't see it. When they succeed in one little step, boy, that resounds throughout the teacher assistants, the resource teacher. Resource teacher may mention it to her principal. Do you know what happened the other day? So I can say that my daughter's been out of school for probably 6 or 7 years now. She just, which I would never have guessed and shocked the socks off me, she just Skyped me. On her own, she was left literally to her own device during her rest period in the afternoon. She was left to play with her iPad. Somehow, she didn't mess it up, which she normally does. She's clicking away and clicked on Skype, and she called me. And I thought her caregiver was in the background, because she's always there when she sets her up with Skype. We prearrange it pretty much. Well, she wasn't there. I thought, you sneaky, you snuck out. You thought you'd be quiet and sneak out and leave my daughter talking with me. Well, I talked, and usually she comes back and says she knows when it's time. My daughter can't speak, by the way. Anyway, she yeses and nos and points and laughs. We do a lot of monkeying around. Anyway, I said, okay, sweetie, I have to go now, and it took a few minutes and clicked off. Well, 20 seconds later, clicked on again. I went, oh, that's funny. So her caregiver came back in, and I said, oh, hi, it's Sharon there now. And she's like, she was half off the camera. And I said, oh, okay. And she's laughing like this. And then I said, okay, I have to go now. And I couldn't see Sharon in the background. I said, click. She did it 3 more times. So I was like, oh my gosh, Sharon's not even there. And my daughter was still half off, laughing her head off. So when I went to see her that evening, I asked the caregiver, I said, thank you so much for setting that up. You don't know what happened after you left. And she's looking at me, and I said, Eric called me three times on her own, and she's still looking at me like, why are you looking at me like that? She says, I didn't put her up to Skype. So, point being, we do not know the potential that lies within every individual. We don't know if we set up the right conditions, what will happen, or when it will happen. So somehow something was done enough times that this allowed her to do what she did. And that is probably can be translated to a lot of students. Identify the challenge is really what you want to do. Pick your battles. Identify the challenge, the one that is at the root of the whole thing. What is it that you're looking for that's bothering you? Is your child being segregated longer than they should be? Are they being taken out? Are you kind of have a funny feeling? You need to discuss it. Do your research first instead of, well, I started with knee-jerk reactions and they didn't get me very far. Then I learned tact and diplomacy. They got me further. But then I learned that if you open your mouth before you've done your research, you're in a whole lot of trouble, because then you start finding out details that you wish you'd had before you open your mouth. So this is a progression of what to do. So research your possibilities and options. Ask your questions first. Ask another resource parent. There's lots of people out there that will give you information if you ask questions. Seek some information first. Go online. Choose to learn to become a team member. So you can be an adversary or an advocate, a collaborative advocate. Gather support and take them with you. Create your own agenda. After all, it's about your son or daughter. So when you take the initiative and create, 3's your maximum, by the way. If you were limited to 2, that's great. If it's just 1, it's just not enough. 3 is great. And make the 3rd one the easiest one. Because it means, and start with an easy one too. Make the meaty one build and say, look, we've gone through this is fantastic. This is where really the challenge, but this is where we need to go to. So it's a nice entry and a nice exit. So when you're, once you've organized the agenda, you pass it forward, you copy everyone on it, say, does anybody else have some input in this? And they was like, yes, pick me, I do. So that's how a collaborative agenda is built. And I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, once the meeting is established, you set up what you'd like your meeting to be about, what the outcomes you would like to see, where your goal is, allow a timeline, get people signed up for doing what and when, and then follow up with them. That's the hard part. You think, okay, that meeting went well, everybody said amazing things, and then you don't hear for 2 months, you don't see anything happening. Well, you need to put a timeline on it. Ask them what would be a good timeline. Don't give it to them, because everybody has their own things that they're going on, involvements. Again, offer choices, follow up, acknowledge, say, that was a great meeting, or wow, that was a meeting full of passion. But I think we made some progress in these areas, at least these 2 areas. Thank you so much. And it was hard, but I think we're going to get through this. So it's encouragement. And then celebrate. So once those deadlines are met, send out a blurb. Oh, did you know that because you did this, my child came home and said, oh my goodness, this is what I learned in science today. And you went, he went to science? Oh my gosh, he's going to science. This is great. So that energy, again, percolates outwards. And finally, once you make the progress there, there's always something next. So where do we go from here? IEP meetings are great. They're technically only supposed to happen once a year, but really, it's not realistic. We want to have a big IEP meeting the end of the year to set it up for the beginning of the next year. Why would you start it in the beginning of the next year without your child not having anything to do? So you want to aim for probably May, finish it up by June, and have everything established for September. It took me years to get that through. And it was just convincing them, it just makes the most sense. And then finally they're like, it's working. So, great. Choosing courses in high school. You know, we started a path. When my daughter's in grade 8, we had a room full of people in our house, including teachers, teacher assistants, specialists, aunts and uncles, my daughter's peers, and family. We all brainstormed what we could see her life looking like for 6 years. Actually, I pushed it to 7 because I wanted it to go 2 years beyond high school so that we got it right, so we were aiming for the goal. And as it was a 6-page document with just words kind of written all down it like this. And it included, she will be engaged with her peers in science. She will be going to semi-formal. Her girlfriends will be making her dress for her. Well, that one didn't happen. She went to the semi-formal and actually was the catalyst for everybody getting on the dance floor. Because my daughter's core is music. I think it's in her DNA. And she's social. Go figure. I have to say, she recently was acclaimed a hero by the local community music jam group. Typical people in there. And she went into that room, there were musicians jamming, there were people sitting, and she went, oh, I could hear her in my head, there's a dance floor. And she's in her wheelchair, and she pushed herself in, thought, this is fantastic, loves musicians to death, and then looked at the people, pointed at one and went, come over here. And they went, Who, me? These are people probably who would never have been paid attention to. And then she was like, come over here. And they went, you want me to come over? They went over and danced with her. And then after about a minute, she went to the next person. She went over, what, you're dropping me? Well, they were too embarrassed to go sit down. So the next person came up until every person in that room was up on the dance floor. She did that continuously for 3 weeks, 3 Fridays, and then the group declared her their hero because she got a bunch of people from sitting. So every individual has value. That is my lesson, and she can pack a punch. That's a good one. Anyway, talking about action reaction, we cannot solve our problems by throwing the same solutions at it. We cannot expect our children to be included when the systems are working from using the same strategies. So we actually have to go out of our comfort zone. Every time you go and advocate for your child means a little bit less that the next person has to do. And I just heard from a conference that I just recently attended that one spokesman who is a parent who is a decade, has been forging ahead a decade before us, said parents are now becoming stronger. So it is working. It's slow, but it's sure. And it's lovely because it helps everybody. It helps the administration. It helps educators and teacher assistants. The stronger we are, the more we can stand up for the rights of our child, the more likely we are to reach a place where we won't have to in the future. That would be our goal. So I'd like to conclude by saying, if you have to sit by the side of a river a very long time before a roast duck flies into your mouth, no, it says you have to sit by a river a very long time before a roast duck will go into your mouth, fly into your mouth. So we can't expect the final meal to be handed to us on a platter. Unfortunately, or fortunately, it always comes with a yin-yang, we're it. The fortunate part is, and I'll say a very personal statement, I would never have developed as deeply personally, I would never have experienced such deep personal development if I hadn't had a child. I actually have 2 children with special needs. So the one is more obvious. The other is on the other end of the spectrum. Interestingly, they have very similar challenges. And that's it for my PowerPoint presentation. And I have some exercises that I'd like you to do. Are you game? Okay. So, each of you have a little cue card. And I would like you to write down, it's a really strong one, I would like you to write down as many things about your child that you love about them as you can. Tiny little things, major things, whatever. Make a list. You people back there, you might want to do the same. Any member of all members of your family. And perhaps on the same sheet, on the same side, make a list of everything you love about yourself. I love that I'm best when I'm the most amazing person if
It's just on the other side, right? Yeah, you can see on the other side.
I'll give you another 15 seconds. And if you can go on, power to you. Very good. It's very difficult when you're faced with a lot of challenge to come up with something good. It's even harder to come up with something good about yourself. However, if you can't come up with something that you love about your child or about yourself, how are you going to convey that to the school system? How are you going to promote and educate others and help others to enable your child? So, some of the items here, is anybody brave enough to share some or would like to? Toot their horn? Your child's horn? Go ahead.
I can say Veer is a very special child. He's kind, loving, and generous. He's talented and musical, and he has an amazing memory and such a wonderful zest for life. I love the passion he has and his enthusiasm for so many things.
Wonderful. That's
Yeah.
very full. I want to know him already. Okay, and so do teachers. When you say it like that, I'm all ears. I want to know if they're musical, if they have a zest. How many kids sit there without zest? So bring it on. Let's get them into that zesty area of education. So that's the place of their strength. And you know what? That's what we did with our daughter doing a path for those 7 or 8 years. We went to her core. So the music was her core too. And socializing. She's a social little girl. Okay, and charming. So when you work off that, why wouldn't a teacher, an educator want that in their classroom? It's catchy. So those are the things you base all their education around. How about you?
Oh, I just wrote that he has a good sense of humor, he's smart, he sees so many things that I don't see,
Oh.
which, like different sides to things. It makes me realize that there's other sides to different things.
Great.
Yeah. And he's uninhibited, but and a lot of times that's not a good thing, but a lot of times it's a good thing too. Like he'll just dance, he doesn't care that, you know.
We wish we were.
And he's out of tune, and you know, that's kind of fun.
You gotta love him.
Yeah.
That's great. And do you have something about yourself you'd like to share with us?
Well, I think I've become quite strong emotionally, you know, throughout this whole journey. I'm compassionate, and I think I'm patient, I guess.
Yeah.
So.
Good for you.
And I bet you're all the other things that you love about your son, too.
Pardon?
I said, I bet you're all the other things that you love
Oh,
about your
thank
son.
you.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Thank
Well,
you.
I think that's what I found. I was writing my line. I said, they learned that from me.
So we're modeling. So we're modeling to them. So and they're reflecting it, which is a miracle, I think. How about you?
Oh, I said he's love, he's kindness, he's gentle, he's brave, he's fragile, he's sweet, he's courageous, he's beautiful.
How old is he?
He's 10.
Oh.
Little.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
And what have you found out about yourself?
Oh, one of the biggest things Aiden has taught me is just to see that the most beautiful things in this world are the tiny little things that like he can point out the smallest of beauty, and I would have walked right past it without him. He spots the eagles when I'm not even looking up. He's yeah.
Do you know that there are some photographers and artists out there who make large amounts of money by focusing in on the small details? So you never know where those kinds of attributes and strengths and traits will lead your child, as long as we build the foundation for them to get there. So just planting a little seed of thought. That's what I am tuned to hear. My daughter can't speak, so I've had to go into her with a microscope, kind of like zoom lens, to find out those things too. Thank you. That was good. And how about you?
Oh, for my son, very simple. He's innocent, pure. He make a lot of giggling voice, and he shake his foot when he listen to music. And he loves eating. He can eat non-stop like a bird. Has a lovely face. He gained 30 pounds after going to the group home. Before that, he's underweight. He's obedient for most of the time. Laughs wholeheartedly. Basically gentle. He's a very good singer.
Oh, good.
But he only repeat the same verse.
Yes. Oh, okay.
He's messing with that.
About myself,
Yes.
I'm open, straightforward, true to my feeling. I regard myself quite a humorist, friendly for most of the time, optimistic, patient in the long run, can be blunt, analytical. My character I think is quite clear and obvious. I don't hide my feelings. I stand on my position. I love nature.
Lovely. Wow, that is beautiful. Very broad. I love the giggle bit.
Yeah.
You know, giggling is infectious.
Yeah.
So people need your son to be around them because he will lighten up their life.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
When he's happy, the group home staff all happy.
Wonderful. So it is in their best interest to build that environment around him that allows him to be that who he can be, the best who he can be. Anybody else?
I
What?
don't have children.
What do you like about yourself?
I think I'm really constant. I'm really normal, except because when I start to study, I don't know how to say this thing, when you can see well the colors, when you have a problem when you see the colors. So I see the yellow is really same for like the green, I don't know how it says, color blind. And they told me, if you are going to study art, it's gonna be, and you are going to study art and graphic designer, and I know, when I was child, always I was painting. And now, fortunately, I live with the money that I get selling my art. So,
And you're colorblind. And you're colorblind.
Yeah.
That
Wow.
remarkable.
This is the only thing that
Remarkable.
It's nothing special. All the people can do if you are constant. It's the only way that you have. It's like you have your brain and say, okay, I can.
Yeah.
You will,
Yeah.
because it's the only option.
And did somebody help you get to where you are?
My mother and my mother is psychology, my father is architect, and they always told me you have to live how you want. It's the only thing that I can. They say because I was really good in mathematics, and sometimes the teachers tell me, why you don't study like architecture, why you don't study like something like engineering that is like have more options. So I don't know, I like painting, and it's the only thing that I did when I was 10, and now I'm 30, and I am painting every day.
Wow. So you are actually the living embodiment of what we're talking about today. You came from a very supportive background. People challenged you, they questioned you, and yet you stayed true to your core the whole way. And that's pretty much the recipe for success. If you're happy, why wouldn't you do what you like doing to make you happier?
Yeah.
You know, so thank you for sharing that. Who knew? There was another, I'm conscious of the time. How much more time do we have, Linda?
I don't know, we have till 8 o'clock.
Okay, so another half hour. We have some documents in front of you. It's the resources. Did you want to have a look at these back there? This is pulled off of the Inclusion BC website.
No, I tried.
And it has, you can be on this for
Oh,
days.
yeah, I just looked at it today, actually.
So the main site I've written on the top, these obviously, have you ever been reading and want to click on it when it's paper? We're having a little Morphe thing happen in our brains.
On magazines, they try to click on
You're
it or make it
or you
bigger
try to
or something
swipe
like
it.
that. Yeah, that's right, swiping.
A newspaper. Okay, so this was run off for us, double-sided. It was a lot of information. Some of the things, we're here today because of inclusion in education, legislation. That's where my journey started. Honestly, when my daughter hit kindergarten, they allowed her to stay for the full day, which I didn't even ask for, which was a real insight on the part of the school district, because they probably knew she would be on a long trek for acquiring skills, and she was indeed. But there was a problem with lunch, where all her peers left for the morning. She was in, now it's full day, I guess,
Yeah.
but she was
It was
left
before that
alone for
time.
lunch, which she'd never been left alone for lunch. So, and then in came the afternoon kindergartners. And I said, and I was told, oh, she's not eating very well at lunch. And I said, really? Oh my goodness, why not? And it went on day after day, and at the second week when she was not eating lunch at all, I became very concerned, and I said, well, she was underweight when she was born, and she is 68 pounds now, and she's 25 years old. So she's typically underweight, but she's strong and mighty. So she just burns a lot of energy. She has cerebral palsy, severe cerebral palsy, and all her muscles are quite tight, and it just burns the calories. She eats like a horse, by the way. So she doesn't lack for anything nutritionally. Anyway, but not eating lunch was a concern. And I knew she had always eaten lunch. In preschool, she'd eaten with her peers. In fact, her peers showed her how you use a spoon, and that's prevented me from ever having to feed her by a spoon, one mouth at a time. She was almost 3. So that was great. I said, well, I don't get it. I just don't get it. Why don't you just like push her next door to the grade 1s? Oh, well, there's an issue. It took a month, and I was labeled one of those parents because I kept addressing this. I just couldn't understand why she was being isolated, or if there was a reason for it, or if she was intentionally or not intentionally. So, so one day I finally said, I just don't get it. You just put her tray on her and you push her next door. And the poor teacher assistant went, oh my gosh. And I looked at her, went, what do you mean, oh my gosh? She said, I forgot about the tray.
Oh.
So it was a technical challenge, just a technical forgetfulness. And so she'd been eating lunch all by herself, and it got to the point where the health nurse said, we're going to have to consider tubal feeding her, which is major issue.
That wasn't me at one point.
No, it was not.
No,
it wasn't.
Take no responsibility for that.
Oh my God. That's hilarious. And I was so shocked, and so that's my frustration vented in that final thing. I said, well, what do you mean a tray? She says, oh, I'm so sorry. I said, it's just the tray? Wow, life should be so easily fixed. So you really, and it kind of set the tone for what kind of a parent I was. So I actually backed off because I had been on the teaching end of things, knowing what those parents were like, and I didn't want to be one of those. And it did take 6 years for me to get them to put a ramp into the building, and another 6 years and a button on the outside of the door. Another 6 years in the high school to get a button put on the outside of the doors. So I chose my battles. That was one that looked like the heavens were opening up. When I pulled up the one day, and I said, look what's on the wall, and she went, oh, she knew what those were because of other places. Anyway, I really forget where we're going with this. We were hitting the websites and advocacy. Please look them over. There are strategies. You will find a gracious way to approach things. It's the best way. And acknowledging effort. Oh, I know what that was. It was kindergarten. I just didn't understand why my daughter was being isolated at some times. And so I was new to British Columbia, and it drove me to the BC Ministry of Education website. And because I was an educator, I read the special education section. And I just went, well, it's all there. All the answers are there. Why is it not being so? That was where my journey began. Why is it? And I'm not finished yet. I'd like to go get my master's and come back at it again.
I'd like to add, so often, Logan, your story of the tray, but you know you have a really good solution when the solution makes you think, why was there a problem?
Yeah.
So many times when you get it resolved, and it's just, you don't know what took you so long because the solution is satisfactory. Like finding a tray missing, or finding a way of communicating something to somebody who's nonverbal. And once you make that gap, you think, what was all the head banging about?
Yes.
It is so simple. You know, a simple adaptation. I mean, rather than go through years of trying to train or deal with the behavior, make a simple adaptation to the environment.
Yeah.
You know?
And that's a good question. Why is it so difficult when I can see the solution? So I learned one question. You might want to write this one down. It's an easy one. How can we make this happen? It's an open-ended question, and it invites input. It's non-blaming. It just states something. How can we make this happen? You have to define this and be specific about what the word this means. How can we make inclusion happen on a regular basis, on a more regular basis? How can we make inclusion happen so we don't notice it at all? So that's your goal. And the word inclusion, how can we make it so we don't even need the word inclusion? So that's where we want to end up. This is on arts and culture, so a number of you have mentioned cultural interests of your children. And by the way, we are cultural beings. They can cut the music therapy program, they can cut the art therapy. However, that does not make us less culturally invested. It's an integral part of our humanness. And so is disability, by the way. Disability is part of the a normal part of the human condition. If there was no disability, if there was no adaptation that was going on over the development of man, we wouldn't be here right now. We would have died with the first virus that
We
came
wouldn't have
along.
computers.
Pardon?
We wouldn't have computers.
That's true.
That's a lot of things. Technology, yeah.
And you know, the irony about technology, and we wouldn't have computers, the irony now is they're using persons with disabilities to find these new solutions in technology. There's companies out there, now all they do is deal in persons with autism that have this amazing focus on technology and they will work until they're told you have to go home now, we're closing a building. So isn't that an irony? So it's wonderful that their disability is being overlooked and accommodated, because they need accommodations in the workplace. So we're getting to that part here. Disability specific and general, you've got your education early to grade 12, actually it's grade 13. Did you know your child has a right to be in school until they turn 19, the year of their 19th birthday? After July, if they turn 19, you can read that one, before July. So you want to use that as a really a time for enriched exploration. They can use school as a base, they can go out in the community, learn those skills they need. Post-secondary, there's lots going on out there. There have been inroads made with steps forward. If you don't ask, you'll never get an answer. If you do ask, you may create something new. Employment. Massachusetts has one of the most comprehensive employment programs of persons with intellectual disabilities. And why are we trying to reinvent the wheel when somebody else has done all the work? There are so many possibilities out there and resources, not only in the employment area, and very successful companies. In the East, this one man has believed so much in these people that he's hired many over the years, and in fact those people who we consider to have intellectual disabilities have become managers. So again, we're flipping the scene. Persons with intellectual disabilities actually have more experience and are very good at their job, better than, and they're working, they have people under them.
In Alberta, the large institution in Red Deer is called the Michener Centre.
Yes.
And in wartime, they were very short of staff. And it turned out that the residents of the institution started running it for that period. Very successful.
They ran the,
Michener Centre
Oh
in
my
Red Deer,
goodness.
Alberta.
well, and one parent brought a good document to me. It was about presuming competence. If I put it in the draft behind education documents I create, presume competence, because that means set up challenge for all your sons and daughters. Educators need to do that, because if they're not challenged, you're not learning. So, employment, we go on to family and support advocacy. You have pamphlets right there, postcards. There's one called Find Support BC. That's another, this is Inclusion BC, Find Support BC. Children's Hospital has something called On Track, ONTRAC. It has a wonderful visual timeline that shows you what happens when, at what age, what you should be doing, what your child should be doing or looking into. On
Is there a
Track.
link on this?
Pardon?
For that? Is there a link on this?
I don't believe so, because it's brand new. They just
Okay.
launched it.
I think I've got it.
OnTrack.ca.
ONTRACK?
ONTRAC.
AC.
Can I just-
.ca.
.ca.
This is actually the youth quiz,
Yes.
and so there's sort of two parts of it. You go to ontrackbc.ca, and then there's a youth toolbox, and then there's a parent checklist, they call it. And basically what I'm suggesting, by the way, I'm Wendy Eves, I'm my Nursing Support Services Coordinator with North Shore's Pediatric Resource Team, and that's why I'm here. I thought I might have to speak to accessing therapy supports in school, and I'm happy to do that. But anyway, so in the high school, I'm suggesting that the kids, or the school actually, have the kids do this youth checklist, and it's got, their voice, their action plans, their connections, future planning and sexual health, you know, they deal with everything here. And then the person just has to check off whether they got it, you know, they don't need to do any more work on that, or they need more support, or and then that can inform the IEP, you know, which, and then the parent one is very similar to, and online, you can, almost every one of these things, you can click on something and it will give you more information about it, which is brilliant. And I think it's not just kids with special needs, I think any adolescent would really benefit from doing that. You know, as I was looking, my daughter should have known that. I was looking for that all over the place. So it really is amazing.
Thanks, Wendy. And literally, there's a North Shore Youth in Transition Committee that's been working for 5 years. And finally, there are many, many things that have been happening that have pulled together. Everybody goes away from the meeting, does their magic, and then slowly, and all of a sudden, all these resources started happening. Glenda's been part of Youth in Transition for a long time, and employment-related progress has been made. So when I say you're part of history, you're coming in at a good time.
Yeah.
Because really, we had to go searching everything on our own way back then. And I thought, and it's been very slowly, but all of a sudden it's just blossomed. And the timeline is beautiful on the On Track site.
Yeah, I don't have that with me.
Yeah,
but,
it is.
online,
It's a beautiful color diagram, which of course I love
And
because
it's
I'm a
simple,
visual
too.
learner.
It's basically simple. It's year by year what things you should be working on, and it's not, oh my goodness, we have to do all these millions of things. And if you start when they're 12 and 13, you know, not waiting till they're 17,
Exactly.
and everything is changing. That's the way it goes. That's what I really like about this program. Can I speak a little bit about pediatric therapy?
Yes, of course.
program?
Come up.
I don't really need to come on, I can just speak here. So, so our team is just.
Okay.
I'm allergic to that. So, our pediatric resource team is just nurses and physiotherapists. We work really collaboratively. I'm glad you said that. So 20-some years ago when I started this job, it was Cindy and a bunch of her cohorts, actually, even before you. But we basically had this big forum, and all the parents just shook their fingers at us and said, look, guys, you need to collaborate before you come into my house and tell. Because we were having the occupational therapist going in and saying, these are the most important things, and then the physio would go in and say, these are the most important things, and then I said, I know, the medical stuff, most important thing. And parents were just going crazy. So we collaborated, and it's looking a lot better. So on the North Shore in Vancouver Coastal Health, we just have this little team, physios and nurses. Nurses do the whole spectrum from birth right up to 19 or 21 or whenever we finally give them up.
We're happy you keep us on for a little bit longer.
That's right, yes. And the physiotherapists, we have early intervention physio, which is a little bit different than the school age therapy system. But so we have the early intervention people, and what we've decided to do, we've always sort of carried them through the kindergarten year because the early intervention person really knew them well, so made good sense. So now what we're doing, because we have a lot of kids, and we only have one, not even one full person with a school-age population. So if the child just needs sort of intermittent stuff and they've accomplished most of the things, they're able to move around the classroom and they're pretty safe, but they still need maybe AFOs or they're going to need some follow-up in physiotherapy, we call them a one. That's school-age therapy one person. And the early intervention people will just keep them all the way through. So even when they're 17, they could say, their AFOs have just fallen apart, or he seems to be having trouble moving or walking or whatever, and that therapist will come in. It's known them it's for years. And if there are two, that's where it gets a little complicated. So if it's something, if they've got so many needs that it's working really well with the therapist they have, almost I could keep the therapist they have, and but then move towards having them over into the school age therapist system. But we'll decide that, we'll make sure that everybody has the, we're collaborative again even within our team, so that we can provide a good service. And if the child has got multiple disabilities, maybe is in a wheelchair, needs lots of equipment and is changing constantly, then we'll call them a 3. And then for sure by school age, they will be with the school age therapist starting right at the beginning of kindergarten. So really, when they're 4, the early intervention therapist will work closely with the school age therapist to get it on. Now, all you need to do if you want therapy services and you don't have them, you just have to call us. You don't have to get a doctor's order or anything, you just have to call and we'll,
And people wouldn't know that.
no.
No.
So you accept the community referral, not just you
Yeah,
accept.
anybody can
Anybody.
refer, that's right.
And this just happens in North Shore?
No, North End, West End, yeah.
What's your phone number? What's the phone number?
Well, it's actually my phone number, but it's, that's what you're gonna, so it's 604-904-6200, and I'm at extension 4162. And I only have 3 of these, but this sort of outlines the 3 parts of the program that we have, but there are 4 of you. So
Is there a website that we can visit? So we.
well, actually, on the Vancouver Coastal Health
Yeah.
website, you can
Not
most
Shore.
likely drill down.
Yeah, good resource team.
Yeah, I could.
Just for one copy?
Yeah, if you just get a photocopy one of them, then we can get it. But, and then if your child needs occupational therapy, that's provided through the Center for Abilities. And again, we work really collaboratively with Center for Abilities, but they're the only ones that have the occupational therapists. And speech language pathology in the school system is within the school system. And it's not as in-depth as maybe you've had in the early years. But there are a lot of private therapists too that you can have outside of school as well, but funding is generally an issue.
So your son has, what's his involvement? What did you say?
No,
No,
development.
global.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we have global dyspraxia, we have speech apraxia, we
Right.
have DCD.
And how old is your son or daughter?
He's almost 11.
And yours?
8.
And do you know each other? Are you from the same, you just met each other tonight?
Yeah.
Our kids go to the same school.
Yeah,
so
Oh, they
know
do.
each
We
other.
know each
good,
other, yeah.
Good, thank you.
What school do you? St. Edmunds. Oh, yeah.
You needed, somebody need one?
Oh, we got
Thank you. Anybody else? There's one.
Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to mention that this, Parents' Handbook on Inclusive Education
Oh, you gave me one.
has gone through a couple of updates, and I wish I'd had it when I was going through school, because it has all the legislation in it. It has tips on participating in a meeting, such as identify the next steps and identify who's responsible for carrying them out. Use good communication skills. Bring a photo. Be assertive but not confrontational. For positive results, I put, for your child, respect me, presume competence, find out what motivates me, not what works for you, as opposed to challenge me, imagine if you were me, embrace and develop my abilities. So that's the positive side. Mostly we hear these things. And I say for negative results, patronize me, talk down to me, force or hurry me, isolate and segregate me, disrespect me, under-challenge me, neglect me, harm me physically, emotionally. So, those are choices in language we use. And it's modeled for us, so we kind of work with those negative, non-productive type of concepts. So if we change the language we use, so I've used words like embrace and opportunity. And instead of a difficulty and a hardship and a challenge, we say, well, a challenge is just an opportunity waiting to happen. And it puts, if you have levity, use it. Find that kind of, make a little joke and say, oh, go on. Yeah, we'd all like to take a day off. I'd like to be waited on hand and foot too, which is what my daughter is, literally. But they've trained her now to challenge her. Here, you pick that up. You threw it on the floor, and so you could see her thinking, going, what? And you'd say, well, how are you going to get down there? And I physically lifted up her armrest and said, come on, you can reach it. And I bent her way over, undid her belt. Of course, you know, it's taking a little danger there. And pushed her down, like leaned her over, and she's, the whole way, what is she doing?
Laughing.
Yeah. I said, come on, use that right arm. Pick it up, pick it up. And she's like, okay, so that's,
But she'll think twice about trying it.
well, exactly. Or she'll do it on purpose.
Yeah.
And she'll poke people as they go by now. It's like, don't do that. She actually did that. She did that to the Prime Minister.
Oh.
And I said, oh, honey, just give him a thumbs up. And she goes like this, which she'd never done before. And she went like this again. And what do you know? The Prime Minister just came right over to her, shook her hand. I went, oh my God. And that wasn't the end of it. She actually got a hug out of him afterwards, but he also had a moment. She allowed him to be another person in that room full of media and things. It was just like, oh my God, what a life you live. It was just a real eye-opener for me. But she allowed him. He closed his eyes. I watched him. Here's her head, there's his. I watched him leave the planet. It was just a moment, and somebody captured it. And that photograph was notified to me and said, this is not typical. Who would I know? I don't have time for politics or knowing even what's happening in my own community. So, and then they said a month or two later, that photograph was framed and shown in the private galleries of the Parliament building. So you just never know the impact of your children. And I have to say, going forward, we did another path for my child. You draw it out on the board, on the wall, paper, you know that 6-page thing that lasted 7 years. We did the next one for the next 10 years, which takes her to age 32, something like that. And she is right on the mark. She literally moved out of the house into her own apartment the day after high school ended. That was not my intention ever, but that's how life worked out. She loved it. I was the one having a hard time disengaging from her. Had to stay away for 3 weeks in order for it to catch, and it just caught like that. I was like, it did? So this is an invaluable document. Do contact Inclusion BC if you're the kind of person that needs to flip through, have a look through this, that wants to be able to flip through and find that section, review or read up on. Family Support Institute does this as well. So this is Family Support Institute. They have a timeline as well with all these drop downs. What they don't have are connections on the drop downs.
Oh, yeah.
And so you have to look that up too, but still at least you know what's coming up. And you can do it at your leisure at 1 in the morning when you're awake. And this is Support Worker Central. How many people have caregivers? Use caregivers. Well, we should have 7, we have 5, so we're on the look for more. I've never actually used this yet, but I tended to use Craigslist to find experienced caregivers. It's amazing what kind of people you find on there, but they started charging. Craigslist started charging.
Yes.
That was the quick way to find people. But then the host agency, we have 5 people looking around the clock, working with my daughter, and an agency looking after all the other stuff. That's at the far end, and our family went into crisis just as the budgeting was happening, so we were lucky. we're lucky because my daughter is so disabled and has complex healthcare issues. We got funding, but not quite enough. So we're struggling and struggling and struggling to make ends meet, and that'll never happen. So we'll continue to do what we as parents know how to do best. It's like improvise, dig deep, dig deeper, and we have each other. So I just finished a 4-day conference with families all over the province. They have people like me, resource parents, all over the province. They go back to their communities. We've heard from ministry people all weekend. We've made connections with other parents that are similar to us, or we need what they have. We've been taught things. Now I know how to graphically facilitate a meeting because there's visual learners out there, don't you know? And so on the North Shore, we will have another transition meeting, probably in the next year, 6 months, a year. And 75 people showed up for that last month. Hungry, and we haven't had a meeting like that for 15 years.
Yes, and it's only like a 2 or 3 week lead time too.
Yeah, it was pretty wicked.
I think this time we'll have a bit more time.
Marta and I were working a little hard. Anyway, you can meet other families that way. I would highly recommend you start up your own parent group where you're at and continue it. We had one running every 3 weeks except for the summer for 13 years. We're still friends. I'm meeting Friday with two mums who I met along the way. I meet with 2 other mums for breakfast, and they're in completely different things. There's one age, my age, and another 15 years younger, and she's picking our brains. So it's very important to have those family connections, and we have a very robust, enriched life. So questions about legislation, it's there. It's driving the foundation of wherever you move. I have never actually had the guts to say, my child has a right to be in every class. There, I said it out loud. But they do. You want to make sure you say it in a way without saying it. Well, yes, I know that my child would do best if, and that's how you get into it. And this actually advocacy, which I did spend quite a bit of time on, is a whole workshop on its own. It goes into quite a lot of detail, lots of exercises. And you know, you just accumulate it on the way and you ask other families. Is anything burning that you would like about that legislation piece, since they've sponsored this? Sometimes you stayed for the whole thing.
I do.
Oh. Thank you. Anybody here that would like to add something to it? We're over time.
Well, thank you, Cindy. This has been really
Anyway,
informative.
thank you for
And
sharing your
before
stories too.